So, Evgeny, your film Cries from Syria examines the horrible situation that's going on right now in Syria. Can you tell us a little bit about the origins of this film?
I think you're talking about what brought me to make the movie and how I made the movie in a simple language. I think coming out of Winch on Fire, that was my previous movie, and seeing the flags of Syrian flags on Maidan, this brought my attention, but it was 2014. But when in 2015, the all headlines of the newspapers in Europe were screaming and yelling, oh, we have an issue, the Islamic people from Syria bringing Islam to our cities, or they're coming as invasion to take over our cities from their own homes. You know what? It was a scary moment, but at the same time, talking to the people around, I not saw this. Secondary, I spoke to many people and I learned that only a small percentage of these people are Syrians. This made me to look for Syrians and understand why they fleeing, why they coming. And I learned that only small percentage, 27, 30% is Syrians who come into European Union. The rest is Afghans, Iraqis. Here we go. From Africa, yeah, thank you. And you know what? I decided to tell their story, to explain this to the people who are Syrians and why they're fleeing their homes. And I went to the border. This is how it started, actually. Because you know what? You just can't go and tell the story about refugees, because at the end of the day, it's like for doctor to treat the symptoms. Doctor need to treat the cause of the disease. So for me, it was the same way. For filmmaker to tell the story, you need to have beginning, middle, and end of the story, and not just the ending points when these people are reaching European Union. So I went to the Middle East, where I found way, way more Syrian people, because they're all around Syrian border. And at the end of the day, I started to do research. I started to learn about them, and I started to spend more time, and I learned that this is the younger generation who've been inspired by Tunisia, inspired by Arab Spring, as a big picture, and they stood against oppression. They stood against the dictatorship in their country that was for a long, long time. And this younger generation was fighting for the same rights that we, as Europeans, Americans, as Western, again, one word, are having in our hands and not cherishing sometimes. But these people went on the streets and started to protest. And these protests, from the peaceful protest, became a protest that were received by the bullets of the government. Then it escalated into the civil war, because some people turned sides, and it escalated into the civil war, and then it escalated to the proxy war that we have in these days. So technically, I try to answer the simple question: who are these people and why are they coming? And what brought them to all these events that we are facing right now?
And you tell the story using footage that was shot by the Syrian people who are on the ground going through these horrible events. It's footage that's really hard to watch. I wonder, what was your response the first time you saw this footage?
First of all, I was diagnosed with PTSD already after Maidan. So I suffered with PTSD prior to that. So for me, I was already exposed to trauma, so some of the stuff that I saw was traumatic to me. Some of the stuff was already something that I used to, because I saw stuff on Maidan. Now, it was horrifying. You know what, as much as we go in more and more and more, we saw that torture of the people, torture of the kids. It's something that became so usual for these people. We saw that chemical attacks were becoming something that they get used to. We only learned in the world, in the Western world, about El Ghouta, and this year we learned about another one. But they had systematically chemical attacks. They had systematically torture and abuse. They had systematically mass killings. So I was learning more and more and more with every step of my project, with every step of research, with every step of meeting each and every character. And for me, it was horrifying. But from another side, I find a lot of hope, a lot of uplifting elements. But the most important, I find that it started with the kids, and all war. We're saying usually the war fought by the man, by the adult. but not in this case. I learned that this started with the younger generation. And that's why I call them kind of lost generation of Syrians. And they, with all their hope, still going into the future. They believe in one day they will rebuild Syria. They all want to go back to Syria. So for me, I learned more and more and more about them, about this younger generation that was involved into that was fighting in different groups, that was helping to their parents, their great spirit, their inventions in a besieged towns when they were living without food, how to sustain a life. So it was interesting to learn about this. And most of my characters that I interviewed were kids. So it was interesting thing that I learned about these people.
And the film covers a lot of ground as well. I mean, you divide it up into these very distinct chapters, and I mean, you give a lot of context to what led up to the events that are going on right now. Can you talk a bit, just from a filmmaking standpoint, about assembling all this footage and about structuring it into, I guess, a sort of narrative of Syria?
You know what? It was, for me, it was a little bit different than my previous movie, because previous movie, it was one story that I was following there on the ground. Here, portion of the story I not was following on the ground. I was it was a necessity to reconstruct it. And then I also was in a situation where I needed to be on the ground and witness some things. So first we started to do it chronologically, but then I realized that there is different places, different events. Then we found us in a situation that we need to break it into the chapters in order to show how one event, one portion of their history led into another. So this is how we came across the idea of the chapters. And also, if you see, I have a pattern in my movies, in both, I guess, that I feel that when you're telling the story, you need to educate people from the point zero. So people who didn't know where Syria geographically or what was prior to this event, I'm trying to give always intro. So I try to create, like I said, beginning, middle, and end. And beginning and middle, technically, following by following beginning and middle, it brings us to the consequences that we live in these days. Now, we had like all my office in Baranda where I was editing this. We had like all 4 walls in a desks where we had like cards with the scenes, with everything. And we were literally trying to put it as a puzzle, as mosaic, first in the boards and then in the computer. And these kind of technical aspects of the ability to play on a board with different scenes helped us to create the narrative and to create a pasty. We kept the paste, and at the same time, I kept a breathing spaces between different scenes because it's a graphic movie, and I didn't want it to go just in a horror story. I wanted to show the spirit of these people. I wanted to show the education of these people. I wanted to show how kids are still believing in the future, because for me, this is still a movie about hope. It's a movie about hope, and that's why, for example, I'm bringing Bana Alabed by the end of the movie, showing that there is hope for this younger generation that still believing in the future of Syria. And I guess I need to give some point about all 3 graphic images that I put it in the movie that going through the timeline of the movie. Ilan Kurdi, 3-year-old child that was, his body was found in September 2015 on Turkish shore. For me, he's symbolizing the death of the kids, the death of the younger generation. Amran, whose image everybody remember from August 2016, 18th of August actually. I was on the Syrian border when it happened in Aleppo, and this image of Amran that everybody saw on CNN and every other outlet, for me it's struggle and survival of these kids. And Bana, who escaped from Aleppo, but still, she's still close to the borders of Syria. She's still voicing the dreams of the kids of Syria. Bana is this hope for the future of Syria, for the younger generation. So I think these all elements that helped me to take all the footage that I received from activists, that I received from individuals and groups and archives and everybody who wanted to share their stories and trusted me as a director and as a filmmaker that I can bring these stories to the world. And in the same time, these different tools and knowledge helped me to reshape it as one comprehensive story versus small news segments.
Now, you see a lot of parallels to what's going on in Syria and around the world with dictatorships. You see a lot of parallels between that and what's going on in this country right now. This is something we talked about at a Q&A in the movie. I wonder if you could talk a bit about that.
First of all, I think let's go for events that happened not far away. When it was a week, I think, ago, when Donald Trump, our president, announced that he will take license to a lot of outlets if they will be criticizing him. So, you know what, these threats, for sure they have a grounds, because it means that there is a truth coming out that our dearest president don't want to come. So it means we already stepping on the toes of our freedom of speech. Same like the event, what happened to the tweet of Nikki Haley, that Nikki, after 4 days, tweeting about the importance of the movie and all the truths that he portrayed in this movie about the fight that Syrian people having against dictatorship of Assad. This tweet was taken 4 days after, and there is no healthy explanations to that, except that somebody from the above requested to take this tweet down because it's probably agitates somebody in different political places. So again, we slowly seeing these elements of a kind of insults or threats to our freedom of speech. Now, we're talking about word rebel. Yesterday on the Q&A with Sharon Waxman, it was interesting. We spoke about the word rebel, but the word rebel in the media was presented in a negative connotation. But who are these rebels at the end of the day? When we hear in the news, oh, Russia fighting with rebels, Assad fighting with rebels, everybody fighting with rebels. But at the end of the day, rebels that coming from the word rebellion, it's the same human beings. It's the same people who stood from the first days of the revolution against the dictatorship. They came to the streets with water, in some circumstances with the flowers, and they voiced themselves against their president. Now, 2017, January, we had a mass protest against our president, who became our new president this year. Now, are we terrorists? Are we rebels? At the end of the day, 5 states wanted to criminalize these protests in the United States. So at the end of the day, we can see the parallels between Syria and the United States. But why Syria and United States? We can go to Ukraine. My last movie, Winter on Fire, January 2014. Everybody who were protesting on a square Maidan since end of November were criminalized by the law that Rada, their parliament, Ukrainian parliament, passed in January 2014, in the mid-January 2014. So they criminalized everybody who was peacefully protesting. So we already having these symptoms of this cancer of dictatorship, one-sided media, because if something goes wrong in the media, our president saying, oh, it's fake news, and repeats it. Now, the story of fake news, I did a research on this extensively when I finished the movie on Maidan. And this is exactly when I saw what means fake news, because I observed this a lot from Russia. It was coming from Russia a lot, because I was staying in Ukraine and European Union, and I was observing Russian outlets, Ukrainian outlets, and I saw how the mechanism of fake news working. It's exactly like Goebbels said, just take a lie big enough and repeat it over and over, and people start to believe in this. So it's coming from the real propaganda machine of Second World War that was developed during the Second World War. And unfortunately, in these days, it's still used. So in our days, media, cameras, social media, becoming a mechanism of the war. And this is what is danger. And this is why, for example, for us, for Americans, it's really important to preserve freedom of speech. So we have more and more outlets, real outlets that can voice the truth. It's important to preserve the democracy. It's important to preserve, for me as an artist, it's important to preserve the freedom of expression, because I, as an artist here in the United States, compared to the Russia, where if I was an artist like myself right now in Russia, I was silenced. I don't want to go into the details, but there is no chance for me being able to express myself like America, United States granted me this chance to express myself through my movies. to go to the world, research, learn about the people, and bring these comprehensive stories. So I'm cherishing these things, and I'm cherishing these not only for me, for every filmmaker that working on my field, because we as documentarians, we have responsibility to take these stories and bring this to the world. So it's more and more coming to us right now, to the documentarians, because we not bounded by any rules of the networks. We're not limited by any rules. So we have this luxury, and for us, it's important to preserve it. For us, it's important to preserve it for the entire United States, sorry, and for the rest of the world. So I think it's healthy and important elements that I want to emphasize through the movie.
Mm-hmm. Real quick before we go, I wanted to talk to you about Winter on Fire, which received Oscar and Emmy nominations. Speaking of documentaries and films being able to transcend and helping to affect change in the world, can you talk a bit about what happened with that film after it was released?
You know what? I think this is something that I should be proud, because we're saying sometimes awards is the proud element, but the proud element that you as a filmmaker able to change lives. Because I think for me, all my purpose in life is like many other filmmakers, they want to change something in their brains. They want to change hearts. They want to save lives. And I think like many of us, we go into the front lines and we're trying to do this. Winter on Fire changed lives of the nations. Venezuela this year was screening Winter on Fire underground, in the streets, in universities, in every possible place, legally and illegally, just to use it as the inspiration and the manual for their revolution against dictatorship. It's beautiful to see how movie from different parts of the world, from Ukraine, with the people who breathing different nationality, different mentality, who breathing different kind of language, able to inspire people 2, 3, 4, 5 years later in different continent, far away in Latin America, where people having different mentality and different ethics, and still the movie able to inspire them, and people healthy can learn from the Winter on Fire, like as a manual of revolution, different things, how to stood against the dictatorship, how to stood against police on the street, how to protest, how to protect themselves. It became a manual of revolution. And it's beautiful when I started to receive this year from this, I think it's happened during the summer, when I started to receive emails and letters on the Facebook and pictures from the streets of Venezuela. It was really beautiful. But I also learned about Brazil, that last year Brazil used our movie, Winter on Fire, to go against their president. And it was another great moment for me, that I was so proud that it's not only one country, it's country after country using Winter on Fire as inspiration, using Winter on Fire as to learn what it means to be united together, how to respect people, how to be together despite different social groups, different ages, rich and poor, different religious aspects or nationalities, because on Maidan we had everybody, and at the same time we had all religious groups together for the first time. And these elements were important for Venezuela, these elements were important to Brazil, and it's beautiful that people can, despite the time, despite the mentalities and different elements, the message of the movie can bridge time, can bridge language, and can bridge all kind of barriers. That's the beauty of filmmaking. And I think this is something that motivates me to go, live, do more movies, and inspire more people. That's real, something that I treasure. For me, it's a treasure. For me, it's something that really important as a filmmaker.
Well, thank you so much, and congratulations again on the film, and pleasure talking to you again.
Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for spreading the word. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good day.